And now GE Digital, GE Software is doing like $6 billion in revenue. Okay. That was not true. If you want to start a new platform business, you need to give that thing autonomy. There's a reason Bill Rue is no longer at GE, because Bill Rue was selling smoke and mirrors. So knowing that all of this was straight up lies, okay? I mean, I guarantee if I audited the books, no, these were lies.
So there's this guy who, he said he was the Madoff whistleblower. So anyway, he's on to GE, and it's funny, like after there's a disaster, I feel like there's 50 people that say, oh, I called that. Oh, I called the recession in 2008. Oh, I'm the whistleblower on Madoff. But
well, I'm sure there was more than one. He might have been one of the prime contributors.
Yeah.
There's often a few folks that contribute to these kinds of things.
So he's on to GE, and he's saying, hey, look, so GE has an insurance company, and he's basically saying that they aren't disclosing, they need to have higher insurance reserves. They're not disclosing information appropriately. Their balance sheet is actually way worse than it looks today. And, this is kind of like the next Enron is basically what this guy is saying. So let's back up the script and look a little historically. It's different management now. So it's not the current CEO and team that's in there at GE. But, if you look at the 5-year for GE here, it's not good. Yikes. What is that? It was at a high of like 31. Now it's at sub 10, 860. So why is that? Well, actually, a few years ago, there used to be all these articles. That was why I'm going to find one while I go through this. GE makes $1 trillion investment in platform economy. Let's see if that pulls it up. This was everywhere where how did the GE make $1 trillion business case to go and become a platform company? I mean, they were crushing the messaging around digital transformation and all these kinds of things.
They had lots of ads recruiting developers saying, hey, we're going to be like Google, come work here, and all this kind of stuff.
Exactly. GE sees digital revenue more than doubling to $15 billion by 2020. So it went on and on and on. And basically what happened is, so GE makes all these machines. They make locomotives. They make planes and engines. They make
wind turbines,
elevators,
a
lot of industrial machinery, elevators, escalators, all these things. I mean, and appliances, but that's kind of not doing so well for them. And, they're saying, oh, we're going to connect all these things together, and then we're going to get all of these efficiencies. This was the IoT, industrial Internet of Things. And boom, whoop, we're going to have a platform, and we're going to be worth gobs and gobs of money. Here's what actually ended up happening. GE has this thing, I think it was originally called GE Digital, then it was called GE Software. And it was a separate business unit. Here was the problem. It was a separate business unit given a P&L. How do you have a new disruptive startup business model doing a platform for industrial Internet of Things, and you give it a P&L? Here's the answer. You don't. If you want to start a new platform business, you need to give that thing autonomy. You need to not tie the hands of the platform behind its back, and give it a P&L. Because if you do that, and you have, I think they had hundreds or thousands of people in this business unit, and that business unit had expectations to have quarterly performance.
Right, before it even really had a successful business model, it was go make money.
So what ended up happening to GE Digital and GE Software is it became a services arm. It became a services arm where they had all these engineers, they had all these technical product development resources.
Internal to GE. So they
started out internally.
Services
started out internally.
Right.
And they would basically say, hey, GE Aviation and Locomotive or whatever is now going to contract with GE Digital for $1 billion. And now GE Digital, GE Software is doing like $6 billion in revenue. Okay. That was not true. It was coming from other GE business units that were basically just using it as an outsourced dev shop to help them on their digital projects.
They just centralized all their IT spending into one business unit and then called it a new business unit.
and they would do that for marketing purposes. Okay. And then what they would do is then they would go become a dev shop for other industrial businesses. And then because now GE had built this brand around being innovative and digital is working for GE, and then they had this thing called Predix. You guys remember Predix? Then they would go and say, hey, other industrial company, pay us a bunch of money and we're going to help you digitalize your own company just like we've done it at GE.
Right. So they've spawned a consulting arm basically out of this.
Exactly. Now, here's the problem. GE actually did have gobs and gobs of potential. You could make a development platform off of GE. Actually, GE also had this thing called GE Healthcare. How did I forget about that? Think about all the medical devices. Think about all the data in the medical devices that are just stuck. And you have Epic and Cerner and all these EHRs that don't open up the data. You could build a development platform. They had things for oil refinery, right? There are so many third-party software developers that would relish at the opportunity to get access to the data coming out of GE's machines, whether healthcare, oil, the smart factory, right? And that software could provide insights to the physician or the doctor, or to the line manager in a factory, or to the operations manager that's dredging and pumping up oil. That software could do predictive maintenance. That software could eventually actually control the machine itself and automate a lot of the machine's functions. There was actually so many different ways that if you break down the value prop of what third-party software companies could do to innovate if given access to the data coming off of the machine, and then eventually some control mechanism of the connected machine, actually a lot of opportunity.
You already have a lot of, it's not just third-party software creators. You have lots of companies that basically create software around their existing machines and devices. It says like hundreds of millions of dollars to billions of dollars of IT spend every year. And rather than basically having that be kind of one-off work that everyone has to do individually, if you start to be able to standardize that and put it into something like an app store, you start to get some economies of scale there and actually start to build successful businesses around offering that software.
There are entire consulting companies, and their whole job is to help an industrial company put connected modems and connected technology onto their machines,
do these one-off implementations,
and then build, AI apps for that specific company. But this is exactly the model of a development platform. Centralize that connected technology, subsidize the cost to install all that connected technology, because then you're going to make it up on the back end when you can take a 30% cut off of all the money that your customers are spending on this third-party software ecosystem, right? That's the model. And I was very hopeful for a long time that was what GE, all these articles were saying. We're spending $1 trillion on industrial Internet of Things and how we made this business case. That was my hope. That's where they were going. But it was all smoke and mirrors.
Right. And they fell into what I would call the typical big company innovation trap, which is
innovator's dilemma.
Let's go do a bunch of big one-off partnerships to make a few headlines and get this into the market.
Yep.
They never actually succeeded at building any kind of bottom-up demand for this. A lot of it was like paid partnerships and stuff where they do one-off with big companies. It wasn't like independent developers or software developers coming in and saying, hey, this is great. Let me go build on this. So they ended up having, like 15 apps and that kind of stuff that were available, not like, at least hundreds they would do
these mega partnerships with big companies. And of course, the big companies are going to say, sure, I'll do stuff with you, GE, you're GE. But the real challenge or the real power is, can you go to the small mom and pop tech startups who don't have a lot of money, don't have a lot of resources,
and who you have leverage over to standardize terms,
and who you have leverage over, where you could say, hey, mom and pop tech startup, or it could be a tech startup. I've raised 5, 10, 50, $100 million. Come and make an investment, build software on top of my platform. I'm going to help get you incremental revenue. But in exchange for that, I'm going to take 30%. And I guarantee all of the partnerships that GE did with all these other big software partners absolutely had zero economics, at least in that structure. I don't know, maybe it was a few points, some small rev share. But there's no way another large software company is going to give up 30 points to GE. Absolutely no way. And that's the whole model of a platform, is when you build bottom up, as you're saying, Nick, if you can build the supply with small fragmented supply, and then you get to the big boys, but you already have some slightly duplicative or competitive or substitute products to what the big boys have. Now you have the leverage to command the 30% from the SAPs or whoever these integration partners are.
This is if you look at enterprise software. So there's, this has happened with Apple and Google and smartphones. But enterprise software, Salesforce did this with their basically Salesforce app ecosystem. They started out basically, Mark Benioff was saying, we're going to go after these small developers, these people that aren't well supported today, and we're going to give them all the tools they need to go. And then you've basically seen people build billion-dollar businesses that all started out building Salesforce apps, things that have gone public or had big acquisitions bought by other companies like Oracle. So things like Eloqua started out as a Salesforce app. I think things like HubSpot and a bunch of the other email automation and sort of CRM data type tools. There's tons of these things out there. Salesforce has a thriving development ecosystem. It's actually a big part of what's been their kind of successful growth story, other than them making lots of acquisitions over the last 3+ years and going forward. And they did that by building that, initially bottom up, focusing on small developers, harnessing that fragmentation, not by just going out and making like 3 big partnerships and saying, oh, look at our development platform.
Oh, this is interesting. So the guy who was running GE Software was a guy named Bill Rue. Bill Rue left GE in December. He's, I guess, running Chief Executive Officer of Digital at Australian construction behemoth Lendlease. Okay. Well, there's a reason Bill Rue is no longer at GE, because Bill Rue was selling smoke and mirrors. Look at this article. GE sees digital revenue more than doubling to $15 billion by 2020. June 23rd, 2016, GE Chief Digital Officer Bill Rue sees the company's digital business, including software and its open source Predix operating system. Man, they nail these buzzwords. Generating about $7 billion in revenue this year and $15 billion by 2020, up from an earlier estimate of about $10 billion. Okay. So knowing that all of this was straight up lies, okay? I mean, I guarantee if I audited the books, no, these were lies. If I audited the $7 billion in revenue, how much of that is coming from GE business units?
Right, a lot of it.
At least half, for sure. They didn't have a $3.5 billion consulting business in June of 2016, like with outside third-party clients. And none of this was disclosed properly. So let's bring this full circle here. Okay, let's go back to GE is the new target of Madoff whistleblower. There are some big skeletons in this closet. If I look at the GE software story, and that's the only thing I'm familiar with, like this insurance thing, I'm not familiar with it. Really don't have much context at all. All I have to judge on is my experience with this GE software debacle. And it really is a shame. It honestly does it an injustice to all traditional enterprises that are trying to innovate. It just gives them all a bad name, because then the Wall Street investors, it's just so hard for them to trust. If this was GE telling me this stuff and literally it blows up and it's actually nothing, and the company's balance sheet is in dire straits and I need to sell off all these businesses, GE Healthcare included, my God, like what can I actually rely on? And so I don't know, I don't know the merits of this, but and this is no knock on the leadership of Larry Culp, the new CEO. I think he's probably a great guy and a very trustworthy guy. I am just scared about what skeletons this guy inherited, because I know this was shady stuff going on in these. It's not even that old. It was just a couple of years ago. He literally left less than 12 months ago. So it was disingenuous. I haven't looked if there's been any shareholder lawsuits, but if there was a shareholder lawsuit on this, I think that would win. Hi, this is Alex Mozed. Thanks for joining us on Winner Take All. If you enjoyed the content today, which I bet you did, please comment, subscribe, and definitely message me on Twitter when we're doing live streams. Also, please note, all opinions expressed about stocks or public companies on the show are exactly that, opinions. This is not investment advice. Don't act on it. WisdomTree licensed Applico's Platform Insights data product to aid in the creation of the PLAT ETF. Thanks for joining us.